Hey everybody, and welcome to Stop the Noise. This is where we get to hear from some of the most interesting and experienced minds, offering us advice and some great ideas about why and how to stop wasting money looking and sounding like everybody else. You know, in business, being the same won't keep you safe. It will make you easy to replace and even easier to ignore. I'm your host, Susan Tatum. Let's get started. Hello and welcome back to Stop the Noise. I'm Susan Tatum, and today I'm talking with Stewart Gandolf, who is the CEO at Healthcare Success, which is a medical advertising and digital marketing agency. Welcome, Stewart.
Hi, Susan. Pleased to be here.
So you've been in business with Healthcare Success for about 15 years, it
Correct.
Looks like. You've grown this massively successful agency. You're being approached now by people that want to buy you. So tell us how you did that. You built the agency from scratch?
Yeah, it's actually I'll try to give you the quick story because it has been 15 years. But yeah, I felt it's funny. I stumbled into the world of healthcare marketing by accident. I was doing something completely different. I started my career in advertising and worked my way to agencies like J. Walter Thompson, left the business for a while. And then at some point, I was recruited into this agency that worked with a lot of doctors. And I thought, first of all, I'm not sure I want to do advertising anymore. How do you guys make any money with this? But the funny thing, Susan, is that it turned out that there's a natural affinity I didn't know in myself. And so the model of that company was a little different than ours, but there's some similarities where I was a speaker and I was flying around the country. And by the way, I had never spoken publicly before in my life. And I had 5 weeks to prepare for my first meeting with very little help. And I had to go in and work with 6 practices, I think it was 12, 15 people. Remember, I'd never spoken publicly ever before, really. And I had to keep them entertained and lead the group like that for 3 days.
Oh.
And on the way up to the meeting, I got stuck in the elevator and somehow made it through anyway. And actually I had a really good weekend and I did a lot of stuff and it went really, really well. So it was a good experience for me. But anyway, that was the beginning of a time where I spent with this other company flying around the country, doing these seminars, leading small groups, and getting lots of experience on speaking, getting lots of experience in healthcare, getting lots of experience in selling, because I would get at-bats every weekend. I'd go and get 5 or 6 opportunities to sell something to somebody. And I didn't realize I was an educator. So it turns out I'm an educator, which will play into this company in just a moment here. So I ended up getting really good at the whole healthcare marketing world and built some skills that, are irreplaceable. And like, for example, we'll talk about sales a little bit later, but one of the things I use as a metaphor is, if most people that are trying to sell something don't get many at-bats all year, right? They might get 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 opportunities a year. I would get that. I'd get more than that in a single month. So the more balls you swing at, the better you get at hitting them, right? So these things became relatively easy for me just because I did it a lot over and over and over again. And I stumbled into a niche that, was kind of a natural. So jumping forward, a few years later, after I did that and became VP of that company and moved on, I again did something else because that's just the wanderlust in me. But I hated that I left all that experience laying in the field. I had this experience where I understood, one of the jokes we talk about a lot is you wake up in the middle of the night and say, you need to build a gastroenterology business, a nephrology business, a psychiatry, a gastroenterology. I can do that. Like every single specialty in medicine and in dentistry, physical therapy, or whatever we've done can talk about. And so I left the business and I thought, well, that's kind of dumb. I mean, I have all this great experience. And while I'm having fun doing something else, I thought maybe I can start this business as a hobby or start a business as a hobby. So a friend of mine that I used to work with as well, and I decided to become partners. And it was honestly an experiment. And so without very little strategy, mostly like, let's put up a website and get discovered and create an agency. But going back to what I said earlier, the educational side of me really helped make this work. So when we started the company, we went and sold a former client some stuff to get some seed money, which was pretty easy because he was a good relationship and he needed stuff anyway. So we did that. And we went and got a website going. But the key was we started off with the idea, the objective, this is in 2006, to get SEO, search engine optimized, and to build on this knowledge base that we had. So the first thing I did was, after getting the website built, we launched a blog. They weren't called blogs then. We called it a newsletter, but it was essentially a blog. The second thing we did was I went to Dental Economics and offered to write an article for them. And after we sent the first article, they said, hey, would you like a regular column? So suddenly now we're writing a column for Dental Economics. We went to Medical Economics, and my former partner and I did a version of our seminar on audio CDs. And we did a deal with Medical Economics where we did a revenue share deal with them. And we sold a couple $100,000 worth of CDs. So those people were paying, a couple $100 to get our advice. And it did exactly what we expected. So we started getting people to call us, and that was really fun days. And so we ended up grossing $1 million almost in our first year. And it was just the two of us, with some freelancers. And it was one of our more profitable years because we didn't have the overhead. So we talk about this now a lot, but we've been doing content marketing before and inbound marketing before those terms existed. Those were terms that came along later. But really, that was it. The idea was to get on the search engines. There was a point there in the early days where we owned every term we wanted, number one, like healthcare marketing, number one worldwide. I went to Medellin, Colombia, and sure enough, I looked at healthcare marketing, we were number one. So we still are heavily SEO'd. We have thousands of pages of content. And so it's harder to own number one in every position now because it goes up and down daily. But we still are pretty heavily SEO'd. And so that inbound marketing stuff really worked for us as we got started. And then eventually, I bought my partner out about, 6 years into it. We're still friends. And then, since then, I've been running the company as the sole owner and CEO. And so, that's where we are today. I think that you also ask about people that are interested in buying our company. I keep telling them no because we're not ready yet, which is, the truth. But the reason why they get interested in us is because of some of this stuff that we'll talk about in more detail probably in a few minutes. But like some of the things that we do that, make people attracted to us is, one, heavy digital focus is certainly something that most of the, PE guys and investment bankers and strategics are looking for. Two, it's the healthcare niche focus. It's so much easier to have a specific industry for so many reasons to attract business, to manage business, to add value to the business. And then third, we have mostly recurring revenue. Recurring revenue is a thing that's what they're looking for. So that's kind of where we are today.
So when you started the company in 2006, I think you said, you were focusing on digital from the get-go?
No, that's a great question. Actually, that was bizarrely, in those days, we were working mostly with smaller practices, one or two or three doctors, not necessarily small for a single doctor practice because they were usually almost always had to be successful in order to afford us. It's funny, just as another side note, when we started off, I had this ambition to be able to provide, full ad agency services at a private practice budget. And it turns out you can't do that. I figured that out. So we have products for individual practices, but you can't have a full ad agency because all those people want to get paid that you're working with, right? But we were doing a lot of, branding and collateral and some external advertising and some digital. But while we were doing it for ourselves aggressively, including paid search and SEO especially, most of our clients weren't either ready for that or, whatever. And we always talk to our clients about another thing we do to add value beyond the stuff that we sell. We help them with things they need to do. So for example, we teach them how to answer the phones or how do they build doctor referrals or how do they treat their patients better or how do they do whatever. So it was like kind of a bundle of services. And we did a lot of projects at that time. And so there was I've had a few aha moments and 3 years-ish into it, I felt like this is a dumb model because the idea initially was we're going to set you up. You're going to pay us X dollars and set you up with everything you need. And then you can do all the rest of the stuff on your own. So the presumption is that's what the client wants, right? They want to be able to get everything they need to get started and save money in the long run by doing everything themselves. And what we found is that's a lose-lose proposition. So from our standpoint, when we did work like that, it was like a shark who has to keep finding new, they talk about sharks who have to keep swimming. They can't fall. Yeah. That's true or not. But the metaphor is that if they stop and sleep, they die. And so they have to keep moving. So that's what it was like. If you work on a project basis, you're like a shark who can never sleep. You're always looking for the next meal. And it's a really exhausting way to live. And it's really hard. And if you think about it, it's really hard how do you do that? How do you continually come up with new ideas, give your best thinking to a client, say, goodbye, we're going to start all over again with somebody else. It's like, and then number two, the amazing thing we found was most clients don't want that. Most clients, they want a partner. They don't want to do transactional work. There are some for sure, but there's a whole bunch that want a deeper relationship because they want to have a partner. And so it's a win-win. That's why I mentioned we have recurring revenue clients, because most of our clients have that kind of relationship where we do a ton of work at the beginning, projects and whatever. But then after that, we have a management agreement where we work with them, or a partnership agreement where we work with them over, a period of time. And we're, really essentially their outsourced marketing department in many cases, depending on the size, or we're the ad agency in other cases. But at any rate, those are important things that came along in our evolution, right? The idea of going after clients that want to be a partner and grow. And so it's evolved. And then going back to your question, the digital services, as things evolved online, because remember 2006, certainly Google was obviously around back then. There was a lot of infrastructure in place, but the power of the internet was still, most people didn't get it. They didn't really understand how powerful it was. And what we found with the digital stuff is that most clients want to hire us for results. And so digital is the easiest way to get there. Like, we can get there through TV, we can get there through newspaper, we can get there through, theoretically knocking on door to door. But if you're talking about something that scales quickly and delivers the highest ROI, it's usually in the digital camp. So we began that transition at the same time toward digital services. And that's our favorite lever because it's faster and it's better ROI-wise. And then coincidentally, it's what people want to buy anyway. So, we focus on that.
What I hear you saying, Stewart, though, is that and I think this is important, you've continued to refine your definition or your idea of what an ideal client is for you as you learn more about the market and what it wants.
Yeah, we pride ourselves in a couple of things. Actually, what's funny, I thought we were going to say, one thing that we've done historically, and we have to continue to do, is reinvent ourselves. I don't think we'd still be here if we were committed to a single model, because every time we have a model, it's the right model for a while, and then we have to evolve away from it.
Yeah.
And I mentioned earlier, I alluded to this as well. Early on, we had a bunch of marketing partner clients that were smaller. And the problem with that is if you try to partner with a client who's too small, then what happens is it's a lot of money to them. And so they feel financial stress. And then if it's also not profitable for you, so nobody's happy, right? Or certainly be happier. So what we found was a way of productizing our products at different levels. So I am excited that we're able to still work with the small guys. We have products that make sense, where the scope makes sense. And this didn't happen at once. It was, a lot of sort of trial and error. But we have products where somebody can pay, a few thousand a month and be a client of ours. And it's all about setting expectations and having the right scope. Because otherwise, suddenly everybody becomes a full service client, and then you have problems. You can't, you can't brand somebody for $2,000 a month, pay-per-click budget, for example.
Yeah. So
we have that level. And then on the larger side, we certainly became more and more enterprise-driven and have, products for that. So it's really is thinking about your target audience space as you generate more clients. And, because the goal is obviously for everybody, you want the client to be happy, you want to be happy. It needs to be a win-win.
So you started the agency, you focused on content and inbound, even though that it wasn't called that then. You were just naturally doing it that way. And when you and I talked before, you mentioned that there was a point at which you realized that although there were plenty of leads coming in through inbound, it wasn't by itself giving you what you wanted in terms of the types of clients you wanted to talk to or the prospects that you wanted to talk to. So you added an outreach component. Is that correct?
Yeah, what happened was that, again, was an evolution. But there's a couple things. One is, I'm big on analogies / metaphors. And so one, if you get to know me, it's hard to go through a conversation without at least one. But one of the ones I use a lot is SEO in particular, and pay-per-click as well. They're kind of like throwing a net into the sea every day. So imagine you're on a big boat and you throw a net into the sea. And, when you reel it in, sometimes you get, an old shoe or a stump or a shark would bite you. Sometimes you get, a lot of little tiny fish that kind of slip through the net. Sometimes you get some say bass and rarely you get a whale. But the thing is that, after a while, if your entire business relies on just that, and as an agency, it's a little disturbing, even if it's successful, because, you can't really control. Plus, there may be some people that are ideal for you that would just never think to search for you online. So there may be like 100, if you look at your top, 100 prospects, you're hoping by chance somehow, someday, somewhere, maybe that the executives of that company will find you online. And that's where I think companies like HubSpot, for a while there, it was like their religion. It's like, you don't need salespeople anymore. That's an outdated, dumb idea that you should just do inbound marketing. And I always thought that was naive. And today they now have gone more towards account-based marketing. Yeah. So they recognize that while inbound marketing is powerful, it's not sufficient. And I think it's became much more of an integrated strategy where we still do inbound and we still do education. Like we sell seminars. So where we're doing kind of a quasi inbound outbound, where we're doing hard mailing, selling a seminar. But one meeting I had in particular that was funny, where, as we were beginning to think more about how is these ideal prospects, am I really going to wait? It could take centuries before they find us, and then they're dead, right? So they're not, it's really, really hard to go after ideal clients if you just sit around and wait for inbound. Inbound should be part of the mix, but not the whole mix. So then what we did was we switched to, I had a meeting once where this lady came to us from at our seminar, and at our seminar we're educating, and we all do it ethically. It's not a big sales pitch. We teach and teach and teach and teach and teach. And so halfway through the first day, she asked me to go to lunch. And she looked at me and she goes, "Stewart, this seminar is amazing, but can't we just cut the crap and do some business together?" And I just laughed. She's like, "I get where this is going, but you don't need to do that. I need a partner. Can you help me? You obviously are smart. Let's just work together." And so I got out of the plane that day. We came, the next day we flew on from Vegas. We do it in 2 days now, not 3. And I had a couple of my key teammates, and I still remember the moment. We're at Orange County, John Wayne Airport. And I told my team, it's like, guys, we're changing the way we're doing business right flipping now. And we're going to go after who we want. And so that's what we did. We started creating a variety of different outreach programs, whether it's, email or calls or mail or whatever, lots of different outreach ways. We identified target audiences where we felt like were ideal for us, that we have a great story for. And so today we have an integrated approach where we still do the inbound. And we just, as I was telling you on our last call, we got a fantastic inquiry from our website a couple months ago that could turn out to be a total marquee client. And we stumbled into that, but we had the right content, the right website presence, the right everything. So that foundation was there. But then, maybe half of our clients today were outreaching too. And so it's a combination. It just leaves you, it's like a diversified stock portfolio. You're not relying on any one thing. And oh, by the way, the other thing with SEO is it's a little challenging beyond the fact you never know what you're going to get. The other thing too is that if you're doing SEO, it's like your business is in the hands of Google. And Google's a fickle mistress, right? So I sleep better knowing I have a whole separate outbound effort going on.
Stewart, what do you see is the difference in the sale itself, inbound versus outbound? Do you go through the same process, or is it different?
No, it's different. On the inbound, it depends on, inbound, another thing I remember back in the early days, I'd go to Google, and everybody came up with these theories that they were absolutely certain. And I'm like, that's not what I found. So when I went out, in the early days, when I'd go to Google's headquarters, because they had this party called Google Dance. So now anybody who's really when I say Google Dance, people that have been in business a long time go, "Oh, wow, you were there." It was a thing. But anyway, when I'd go to Google Dance, the engineers would tell me, you have to give them an ebook first because they're not going to be confident enough to call you. And I'm like, that's not true, because I'd say half of our calls are right off impulse. And that's true today. So about half of the people who call us off the internet call us impulse. They're on the site, they found it, they just call us. There's another half. So those are similar in the way you approach them in a way, although they have a need, right? So you think about it, those that call us on impulse don't have any credibility really built with us besides what they just saw. So they're a little harder. Like on the scale, the hardest ones are people you're reaching out to because you don't even know they have a need. The next part would be people that found you on impulse. And the third category are fans, people that have been following our stuff for years, and those are obviously a lot easier. So, I once had somebody from Australia fly to my seminar, paid to fly across the world to my seminar, and it happened to be in New York, not in California, so it was even further away. And she sat through the whole meeting looking at me like a rock star. And one of my favorite podcast guests was there at the meeting for his own business. I was helping him market his own business. And she's like, "Oh my gosh, and you're Paul, you're amazing." So it's obviously easier when you have that kind of credibility. So this week, for example, we're working with a company in the radiology business where, they listened to a couple of our webinars. The first thing we came back with them didn't go anywhere internally, and now we're back to engage for SEO. So it is certainly easier when you have that credibility.
Yeah, because they already feel like they know you and trust you and like you and all of that good stuff.
Yeah, we're not going to do that today as much, but we talked about that last time where, if you're talking on content, and I know you've talked about this topic with other people, but I think the mix of, blogs and podcasts and webinars is great. What I find is podcasts and webinars are better because those that listen, first of all, are committing more, right, than just reading a blog. And even more than reading an ebook. I forgot ebooks. Ebooks are good too. But they feel like they know you if you've been on a podcast interview or you've interviewed. Like on my interviews, when I'm doing what you do, because we do a lot of podcasts, I throw my own 2 cents in. I'm not just, I really try to add my own spin to stuff because it's usually about something I'm also an expert in. And so the people feel like they know me. And
yeah.
Hopefully those of you that are listening to this will feel like you know me and say, hey, let's do some business. Let's
give them a call. Well, so a whole bunch of other things I want to ask you about, Stewart. We're going to run short of time here, but quickly, you mentioned earlier in this conversation that you found that you just had a natural tendency to be a salesperson. But when we talked previously, you referred to yourself as the reluctant salesperson.
Yeah, no, I apologize. Yeah, maybe I wasn't clear. I think I'm a natural educator. I'm not a natural salesperson.
Okay, I may have
So if I wasn't clear, I apologize. So what happened there was, that's a fun story, because you asked about, when we talked before, you asked about what agency owners and leaders often struggle with, and a lot of them struggle with the sales process. And you asked me for my guidance on that. And the story that we discussed, and that we'll talk about now, is the following. There was a point in my career where I used to work for J. Walter Thompson. It was certainly a prestigious account. It wasn't an easy or fun job. It was really, really hard. And the part about it that used to drive me crazy was my print sales guy would come in, always happy, always in a really nice suit, and clearly making a lot more money than I was. And, I was working 60 hours a week and wasn't feeling the way he was. So I thought, okay, well, this advertising stuff is fun, but I really want to make money right now. And this, by the way, was back in one of the housing booms in LA, so prices were going out of crazy. So the idea of buying my first house just seemed impossible. So I decided to go into sales. So I got into commercial real estate, and I was doing industrial and investment properties, which is, selling great big, shopping centers or industrial buildings. And when you're selling or leasing industrial to tenants, you have to actually go cold call, like old-fashioned way, at least back then. I don't know what they do now. And so, I remember I was standing in front of this building. I still remember the building. I probably could find it still in Rancho Dominguez, and looking at this building going, I don't really want to do this, to walk in and cold call somebody. I've got a college education, I have an MBA, I'm smarter than this. I don't really want to do this. And I thought about it like, okay, so either I go back to the office and resign because I can't do the job, or I'm going to go in there and go do this. And so I did. And so nobody died, nobody cried, nobody screamed at me. I'm like, okay, I did that one. Maybe I can do it again. And so there are some key moments in owning any business where it's like, do you want this or not? And the other joke is like, if you're all shy and embarrassable and you're single, it's like, well, do you want to meet someone or not?
Yeah.
You're going to have to do something different. So I think that's important. And so the sales process, was not natural at it. And I just worked that much harder. A lot of times I make up for my deficiencies just by working harder than anybody else. And so when I was in commercial real estate, I timed it with the riots and the commercial real estate depression.
Perfect.
I still made some money there, but it was, it was up and down. But the point was, though, that gave me the courage and the recognition that I have to really do this. And then later on, those skills got better and better. The point I was making earlier wasn't so much that I enjoyed sales. It just became more easy for me because I did it over and over again. But those first days, again, if you're an agency owner, there may be moments in your life like, well, do you want to do this? Or do you want to own an agency or not? Or do you want to get this client or not? Because you have to get past it because there's no other way to do it.
Well, and as you alluded to, that's not the only time that you have to make a decision like that when you own an agency or any kind of firm. There's a lot of other decisions.
Yeah, it happens all the time. I talked to my former partner the other day, and I'm like, Lonnie, it's not any easier. It's still flipping hard. It's just bigger. The problems are bigger, so it's, I don't think if you chose a creative business now, if you're whoever's listening, if you own a scalable digital agency and everything's running smoothly, that's one thing. But truly, if you have creative involved, by its nature, there's going to be different challenges all the time. And it's a very human business. So the agency business is not the easiest business to get into for sure.
True. And even harder to stay into sometimes, I think.
Yep.
All right. So one last question, Stewart, and that is, what would you do differently if you were starting an agency now?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I would say the two things that I think hopefully will be helpful to your listeners. One is, especially, and I think the people that are listening and been in the business longer will agree. I would say number one, first of all, is be really careful on hiring people. At the beginning, people told me they could do a job, so I believed them. Or I hired friends. That's brutal. Somebody I knew, may have been, really great at some other endeavor, and I brought them in thinking that they would think like I do. I feel like one of the things that I've done is, one is I assume everybody else thinks like me, and my personality is really strange and weird, and most people don't think like me. So if you're a natural entrepreneur, you approach things like an entrepreneur, and you expect everybody else will too, but that's not the way most people are wired. So I think, and the problem was when you're small, you can get away with that, right? So you just work harder. Somebody else isn't fully pulling their own weight. It's like, okay, fine, I'll do it, right? And then somebody else isn't really fully pulling their own weight. Like, fine, I'll do that. And so what happens is you end up with this bloated organization with, mediocre performers. I'm not saying that everybody in my company ever has been mediocre, but we certainly suffered through some people that weren't the right fit, particularly in the early days. And it's a big anchor on the agency. So hire really carefully, take it really seriously, and really, really, really seriously, and check references. And whenever you're hiring for something you don't know about, try to find somebody who knows that area better than you do. So like, for example, if you're more of a creative agency and you want to get into website stuff more, then don't just go hire the first website designer you see. Find a developer, designer, consultant, or somebody to help you figure out where the talent is, because it's really, and like SEO is another category. It's really easy to be fooled.
Oh yeah.
If you don't know this stuff and you haven't done the homework. Like for us, I knew SEO because I did it for our own company, so it was easier. But yeah, I would say picking the right people is number one. Number two, I would do differently. I mentioned how we did this as a hobby. I mean, I really did it without any strategy at all. We just said, I started this part-time. Those CDs I told you about, I recorded those in a studio. I was still working for my other company. I was meeting with attorneys doing estate tax mitigation of all things. And I would race from those meetings and go to the studio and go, okay, here's how you get patients internally. And go record those CDs. I mean, literally, it was just like that. So there was no strategy. It was because we had all this knowledge, it was easy for us I kind of had a sense of where I wanted to go. And it was like we got into the tactics really quickly. Yeah. But I didn't spend the time thinking through what's the business model? How's it, how are we going to get to recurring revenue? It was just how do we get something going, which is forgivable when you're an entrepreneur. When you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to get something going, it really is the most important thing is to get something going. You can't sit around and theorize forever. But I would spend a little more time if I had to do it over again there. And then I think the last thing that I would do is, again, focus on who I want as a client, what's the ideal prospect, and then create the company for that. I mentioned one other thing too that's probably relevant. I'm trying to give as much as I can in a short amount of time. I think it's really relevant is as you go upstream, I think it's important to recognize that as your contracts get bigger and the demands get bigger and the support gets bigger, you can't service things. If you start going after larger clients, you can't service them the same way you did smaller clients. And that seems like a no-duh, but we really didn't get that for a while. So it's an evolution. I think we've done a great job. I think our clients are happy. We always have some are happier than others in general. Obviously, everybody has that. Every doctor has that. Everyone has happier than other customers. But I think it's really important to try to, start from a philosophy of win-win and come up with the right level of service and the right level of client and make that all match. And just try to find some time to do that. Today we were talking on an internal meeting about, how we plan for our clients. And it's just really important to get everything aligned, right? And to take the time to think strategically, because it's really easy in the agency business to get tactical and you're just doing a bunch of stuff. And then you lose the focus from, what's the big picture? What are we really trying to accomplish here, both internally and externally with the client? So those are some of the things I would say are really important.
Those are excellent tips. Thank you. If the listeners that want to get to know you better, know more about you, get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Sure. There's a couple ways. First of all, if you're on Twitter, I'm on Twitter. And by the time you're listening to this, hopefully it'll be less political. I used to only tweet about marketing, Susan. This last year has been a little difficult for me. So I'm on Twitter. LinkedIn's easy. It's just Stewart Gandolf. And if you're interested in contacting me, just contact me at Stewart, Stewart, @healthcaresuccess.com. And my assistant will reach out to you, or I'll reach out to you and set up a time to talk.
All right. Sounds great. This is December 17th, 2020. So I'm wishing you a happy holidays.
Yeah, thank you. You too.
Stay safe.
We're huddled down. My kids are both introverts. My wife's an introvert. As an omnivert, I can do both. I can certainly be extrovert or introvert, but it's a really funny time right now. We're not freaking out. We actually like each other. So it's not too bad, but I'm looking forward to being, a healthier country, less crazy politics country. Looking forward to those days.
Yeah.
So, have a happy and safe holiday too.
All right. Bye. Yeah.